Here we are in Chapter 2 already, and what we're going to do is look at some information security management. But before we get into that information security management, we're going to go back to our favorite slide of all time. That's right, we're going to go back and look at the CNSS security model. And in fact, that's what this video is going to do. We're going to take that CNSS security model, and we're going to look at those 6 attacks in that first column: viruses, spam, denial of service attacks, changing bank account information or skimming, insider attack, and then phishing. But before we do that, let's review this cube one more time. Confidentiality. Can I protect the information so that others cannot read it? Can I protect the information through integrity so that others cannot change it? And then availability. Can I protect the information so that others can get to that information? We're going to do that during 3 different phases: the storage phase, the processing phase, and the transmission phase. And then finally, we're going to use 3 tools: policy, education, and technology. You put all of these together and you've got the CNSS security model, or you've got the Macumber cube. You can use either title. All right, so let's go in and start looking at that first column, and we're going to start off with this idea of a virus. Okay, so here's the definition from Wikipedia. I'm not going to read that to you, but this idea of viruses is that they're self-replicating computer programs which install themselves without user consent. Now, some websites are going to claim that, and it's fine, they can claim that it takes user interaction. And the difference between a worm and a virus is that user interaction for a virus to actually work. Let's go ahead and look at one of the famous virus attacks. Let's look at the Melissa worm. So, Melissa worm was released in March 26 of 1999. You got an email like you see in this picture here on the right. It came from somebody you knew. It did not come from a stranger. And the message says, here's the document you asked for, don't show anybody else. And then it had a list or list 1 document, a Word document attached to it. If you were to double click on that document, it would actually launch the macro attack. And rather than listen to me talk about it, let's go and listen to a account from a user perspective of the Melissa virus and from a security manager perspective of the Melissa virus.
As I composed the last email of the day, a message hit the inbox of my Microsoft Outlook email application. The subject line read, "Important message from Jane Doe." I viewed the message, and the body read, "Here is that document you asked for. Don't show anyone else. Winky face." Attached was a Microsoft Word document titled list1.doc. Although I hadn't requested any documents from Jane Doe, I was expecting a couple of them from other people. It wasn't inconceivable to think that she had become involved, even though I didn't know who she was. I double-clicked on the Word document. A pop-up window appeared, warning me that a macro was contained in the document, and that macros can potentially be dangerous. I knew that, smiley face, so I shut down the Word application and checked the document with several of the virus detection packages that I had. Everything appeared clean. Since this was from someone in my organization, apparently a trusted source, I went ahead and opened the document with the macros enabled. In less than a second, a duplicate of the message had hit my mailbox, this time with my name attached. I hit the power off button on my computer, but it was late. The payload had been delivered. My name was now attached to a file containing pornographic websites, and an apparent username and password for each site. Moments later, duplicate messages from others who had made the same mistake began to appear. At this point I knew we, as an organization, were in trouble. This virus, or worm, was snowballing fast, too fast. I immediately called our information system security manager, only to find that his phone was already busy. I left a voicemail detailing my appraisal of the situation, and my fear that this incident could get serious, very quickly. What I didn't know was that I was too late. It was already very serious.
As soon as we discovered the virus late Friday afternoon, we disconnected our servers, all SMTP relays and Exchange servers at our internet connection, from the network until we could contain the infection. This happened at approximately 6 p.m. Friday. System administrators for both corporate and departmental Exchange servers worked through Friday night and well into Saturday. Many returned Saturday and again on Sunday to complete the isolation and cleanup. They cleaned up the Exchange servers with updated antiviral signatures as soon as they were available. The corporate servers and one departmental server were ready to come back online late Sunday. We left IMS, Internet Mail Service, disabled until we could contain, filtered, email at the SMTP server. Our version of SendMail is one removed from the latest, and filter updates provided by the author would not work on our version. We resorted to getting the word out for all users to update the AV signatures and refrain from sending Word docs until any with macros had been identified as coming from trusted sources. The administrator for the SMTP relay host downloaded a trial version of Interscan Virus Wall from Trend Micro. The cleanup picture would have been much bleaker if we hadn't had so many things in our favor. System administrators were still at work when the problem started, approximately 4:40 on Friday. Most of the users were gone for the weekend, and didn't compound the problem by manually sending additional copies of the infected document. All of the system administrators involved in the cleanup had been trained in incident handling. The person who needed to make key decisions was trained in incident response and had already begun carrying a cell phone. Base commanders recognized the expertise that was in use and supported the incident handling team by not directing what needed to be done, at least so far. Note: the incident handling process used by this site is based on 6 stages of incident handling: preparation, identification, containment, eradication, and follow-up.
Asking yourself, who's the guy in the picture? The guy in the picture is the guy that wrote the Melissa virus. He actually, and I'm not making this up, he wrote it for a hooker that he really liked a lot. And at the end of the day, he did not think it would have such an impact across the world, but it did. And he was sentenced to 10 years in jail. He only served 2 years when he did a bargain with the FBI to help shut down another virus and not serve the remainder of his time. Well, what else should you pick up from this? The antivirus software, which hopefully all of you have got on your machine, has what are called signatures. And those signatures, those electronic signatures, are really a recording of a bit pattern, a unique series of ones and zeros that identify that a virus is included in an email or in a file. And so those signatures allow antivirus software to detect viruses and to block them or defeat them or remove them from a particular message or file. Those signatures are updated many times during the day. And when you hear the term a zero-day attack, you're referring to an attack for which a signature file doesn't exist, that the antivirus companies don't know how to detect it or how to deal with it. And as you were listening to the audio of the security managers, they were dealing initially with a zero-day attack. They did not have signatures that allowed them to detect and defeat it. And later on in the process, they were able to download and install those signatures into their antivirus systems, and to also protect the systems by getting those signatures into network devices so that it would be deleted before it ever even hit the mail server. All right, so let's talk about this a little bit. When we look at viruses and we look at the different tools that we've got out there, can policy help us with viruses? Yes, it can. Can education, training, and awareness programs help us with viruses? Well, yes, it can. And as you saw in the conversation with the user, or the user recount of the scenario, he knew that macros were a bad idea, and he knew that he should check it with antivirus software, but it was not enough. And then finally, you had technology. And really, for viruses these days, technology is the dominant tool to detect viruses and defeat them. If the antivirus software has a signature for a virus, then it's going to be successful in removing or at least detecting that the virus exists. The other thing to keep in mind is that the bad guys and bad gals have grown more sophisticated too. So they build rootkits that contain a series of different virus attacks that can be used. And so these automated kits allow them to assemble a variety of different attacks and then launch those attacks. So we've talked through viruses. Let's now move on and talk about spam.
A little bit about spam. So spam is this use of electronic messaging systems, and it doesn't have to be email. It could be messaging. It actually could be blogs or wiki or all sorts of ads, or all forms of spam. And what you're getting is it's unsolicited messaging, and typically it's a large number of messages that are coming in. And if you go back maybe 10 years ago, our technology was not as advanced in terms of tracking this, and so you had large numbers of messages coming in that users had to deal with. And if you do a quick search Bing or Google, you'll see that spam accounts for a very large proportion of the mail right now. And the reason why is because it's very low entry into this field. So advertisers have very limited cost in doing this, and they realize real profits by people clicking on these unsolicited messages and either buying services or succumbing to an attack on their computer. So as we look at the CNSS security model as it relates to spam, it's really an attack not on storage or processing. Well, you could say it's on processing by the human, but it's really on transmission. It is consuming a large portion of internet bandwidth right now. The vast majority of email messages are actually spam messages. And so it's a transmission attack, and it's an availability attack. It's not really confidentiality and integrity, although it could affect those areas. It's much more availability. And as you look at the three tools of policy, education, and technology, technology has gotten much, much better and is the principal mechanism for dealing with spam messages. If you have the right technology in place, you should be able to either eliminate or vastly reduce the impact of spam on your organization.
Well, here we are, and we're going to pick it back up and look at distributed denial of service attacks. And as you can see in that diagram to the left, what you're doing is you've got all of these attackers going through a multitude of different approaches, multitude of different networks to attack your target server. And you're doing this because you're doing an attack on availability. And that allows you to make a target server not available. So imagine, if you will, that you're an attacker running an ad for a distributed denial of service attack. There's an ad from Russia to do this, actually two ads from Russia. And what you're doing is selling the ability to bring down a server. So you could bring down the corporate server of someone you're competing against. You could be attacking a game, say the World of Warcraft or League of Legends, and going out and saying, if you don't pay me $10,000 a month, I'm going to unleash 1 million computers to take down your servers. So that's what a distributed denial of service attack looks like. You can use it for lots and lots of different use cases. Let me give you an example, and this actually within the video links to a YouTube movie, and I'll make sure that's available in the course. But the kids in a middle school raised $25 and used their $25 to buy a distributed denial of service attack, so they did not have to take final exams on a particular day. And so for $25, they were able to shut down those servers for one day and get an extra day to study for their exam. So it's relatively inexpensive. It's why people go out and try to take over your computers, because they can use them in distributed denial of service attacks. They're difficult to deal with. And if the way you typically, going back to our model, think about distributed denial of service attacks, it's an attack on availability. It's typically an attack on transmission, if you think about it. And you're going to use a mix of policy and technology to address this. So the technology piece is there are certain companies, Akamai is one that pops to mind, there are others, that sell the ability to go upstream, detect that distributed denial of service attack, and block it really at the internet level. So they go out and they're uniquely looking for those attacks and being able to block it. Expensive to do that, but you can pay companies to do that. The other mechanism is to make sure that you've got enough capacity in terms of network connectivity through different peering partners to be able to continue to provide bandwidth to your customers despite the distributed denial of service attack. A good example of this has actually occurred in Georgia recently. Their private cloud, PeachNet, came under attack from a nation state, and that attack went on for at least 9 months without the customers ever noticing it. And part of that was because of the richness of the different peering partners. PeachNet had at the time 47, 49 peering partners it was using, and it was able to help block that. Being able to have contracts in place through the appropriate policy so that you can expand your bandwidth to meet that surge demand is another mechanism that allows you to overwhelm a distributed denial of service attack. All right, 3 attacks down. Let's move on and look at changing bank account information. And when you're looking at changing bank account information, there are really a couple of different ways of doing this. One, as you can see in this video, as the image on the left, is where they're going to put a device that captures not only the credit card information, but captures the PIN number entered and allows you to gather credit card information and use it. The second, which is the video on the right, you may not recognize that. It's not the easiest thing to remember, but for those of you who are into trivia, that's actually a scene from Office Space, and that's the amount of money that they were able to skim by holding the fractions of pennies off of their company that they were trying to attack. So the 2 different mechanisms for doing this, one of which is that, as you can see on the left, is where you're adding a fake interface. Both interfaces continue to work, but it allows you to capture, to harvest credit card information, and it looks just like it was a normal card entry. And the one on the right is a reference to Office Space and this idea that you can go in and write programs that capture fractions of pennies, skim those fractions of pennies, roll them into a central account. And for those of you who've seen Office Space, they got way too much money in 1 week, $305,000, and that led to challenges associated with hiding that, because $250,000 is going to be noticeable by the underlying company. All right, let's move forward and talk a little bit about inside attacks. And so the general idea, there's a cartoon on the top about phishing and why those types of things work. So we're talking about insiders and phishing. But phishing attacks is where you're going out, and just like phishing spelled with an F, you're casting a line. In the case of a computer phishing attack, you're casting millions of lines trying to get someone to provide sensitive information that allows them to either attack your account, your bank account, or attack your and gain control of your computer. And so lots of different ways of doing that. The most effective techniques for protecting this, believe it or not, is education, training, and awareness, especially active anti-phishing training that you can now purchase from companies like FishMe or SecureWorks or many others actually that are out there. So phishing are going to be these emails asking you to click on a link, provide your username or password, unzip a file, take some action like that. Very common, and again, education is going to be the best way to address that. Insider attacks are on the rise, and you're seeing more and more of those things, and that's where someone's coming in and it's a person that is authenticated into your system, and otherwise they have proper credentials to log into your system. They have authorization, going back to some of those terms we learned during our first class, authorization to do certain things, and then they take that authorization, misuse it to do other things. So if you look at that story over on the left, that occurred at Valdosta State University there in Georgia, and in this case, a student worker was hired to do backups on the student information system. He found that when he got his permissions, not only could he do backups on the system, he could also access all the student records and change all the grades. So he set up a website to sell changing grades at Valdosta State University, and the worse your grade was, the more he charged to fix it. So if you got a B and you wanted to move it to an A, it wouldn't cost a lot of money, but if you get an F and you wanted to move it to an A, it cost a lot more money. Now that's not very logical. It didn't cost him any additional effort to change a F into an A or a B into an A, but he figured he'd make more money that way. And so again, if you think about it, the student worker had authentication to get into the system. He was authorized to do backups. The mistake occurred in that that was not narrow enough, and that authorization also allowed him to change student grades. And so at the end of the day, he ended up getting expelled from the university. You might ask why he didn't have a stiffer penalty, and the answer is he was legally blind. So he wrote the code and performed this while being legally blind. He was also a freshman when this occurred. So that's the idea of insider attacks, and it's one of those things where you have to think about what happened and what can you do to protect inside your own organization against those types of attacks. We'll look at that. We've come to the end of at least the first 6 types of attacks. We started out with viruses and talked about the Melissa virus. We moved to spam, and talked about those types of attacks. And in both of those, technology has actually got quite good at doing protection against those attacks. And we then moved into denial of service, which is this availability-based attack against transmission. We talked about changing bank accounts via skimming, showed 2 different ways. Both of those were attacks against integrity, and both of those were attacks that typically occurred during processing, and you can address those using policy and technology. Talked about an insider attack. Again, policy would be probably the best way to fix that, and those insider attacks could target typically confidentiality and integrity. It could target availability, but that's somewhat rare. And typically those insider attacks are attacking storage, but again, it could be processing and transmission phases. Finally, we move on to phishing, which we talked about, and again, phishing is an attack typically against confidentiality and integrity. It typically occurs during processing. In other words, you usually have to click or do something as a user for something to happen. And education was the dominant mechanism for addressing those attacks. All right, well, very good. I'm going to bring this video to an end. In the next video, we're going to pick up right back here on this slide, and we're going to talk about 6 new different types of attacks. So keep on studying, keep on learning, and look forward to seeing you online.